Hi, I'm Amanda Jane, and welcome to the Communicate with Confidence podcast. My aim is to take the fear out of communicating and make it easy and fun. On this podcast, I'm going to be talking about everything to do with good communication, how we can connect with our audience, get better at speaking and giving presentations, increase visibility, and ultimately get more sales. I'll also be talking to some incredible people about their business, and I'll be getting their insights on how they view communication and how comfortable they are showing up in person and on social media. So let's get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Communicate with Confidence podcast. I'm your host Amanda Jane, and today I have with me Naomi Rose. Hello Naomi.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this because you are incredibly talented, incredibly busy, and I'm just dying to ask you loads and loads of questions. But before we get stuck in, have you had a chance to think about a motivational song?
Oh yes. So actually, I've this song. Sometimes with music that you can get a song in your head for a while and then you put it back down for a while and then you're like, I need to get that song back out. For me, and I never used to particularly like this artist bizarrely, but Pink's Just Like Fire. And the reason I picked this one is because I watched her documentary on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called now, but she was talking about her show and how she sets up her show and she takes her kids on tour with her and her approach to parenting. And it was this song that when you actually really listen to the lyrics, and like some days I just need to feel like I'm just like fire. And it just like I'm creating my own path, I'm going in my way. And yeah. And funnily, and I never really kind of listened to the words until I heard her singing it live, obviously on Netflix. So that's why I picked it, because I think actually some days you just need to feel just like fire.
I love Pink. I don't know that song, and I am going to listen to it straight after this recording. It sounds
Yeah,
fantastic.
that
But yeah,
that might not be the name of it. I can't remember, but that's the
oh,
main lyrics on
we will find it
it.
and add it to the Spotify list. But I love that. Sometimes you just need a song that makes you feel invincible, doesn't it? And Fire is just
Oh,
one of those things. But yeah,
definitely. And if
she's a
it,
real powerhouse, isn't she? I love her.
yeah, definitely go watch her Netflix documentary. It is actually just amazing to see an artist and how it's in the form of business. So what they do is they are business leaders. And like she said in the documentary, I'm responsible for over 200 people while I'm on tour and I'm touring the world. And you see all of the kind of the glam, the planes and all of the stuff. You don't see what actually it takes to deliver those sorts of tours and the things she does. So it's truly inspirational, her approach to leadership and how she manages family, work-life balance in amongst all of that. It's just a different approach, which I think is really nice to see. So definitely go and check that one out.
I will, and it's so interesting because when you're, when you're a fan of someone like that, and you go to a concert and you just see them up there doing their thing, you never, as a fan, consider the backstage stuff. And I suppose naively you think, oh, someone else does all that, but she's the creative force, isn't she? And I hadn't considered
Mm.
that she was the leader in all of that. And we've had Taylor Swift dominating the world recently as well, and she's another powerhouse, and she must feel that same responsibility, managing and leading all those people. But no, it made me think of something that I hadn't considered before. Thank you, Naomi. So
That's
interesting.
okay. There's your next Netflix viewing for tonight,
Oh, I
anyway.
know. And I love all that behind the scenes stuff. And what about a motivational quote? Do you have something that kind of you refer to in low moments, or something that spurs you on?
I have so many motivational quotes. I actually do like an inspirational quote every week on my social pages because I think sometimes other people need that little pick me up. And there are lots of quotes that have inspired me over my time. So it's really hard to just pick one. The one that I will pick, and I can't repeat it word for word because I can never get it quite right. And it's one I have posted on my social pages recently. It's from Whitney Houston, where she actually says, I will never walk in somebody else's shadows because that's not the right path for me. And that is the essence of the quote.
Mm.
And I exactly feel like that because I think sometimes we get so caught up, and particularly in the digital age where we consume media in such fast-paced ways, it's so easy to get caught up in what everybody else is doing. And actually, I've never felt like I've been fitted into one box. I'm never been like, I'm not very, hence why I'm probably an entrepreneur, is because I'm not very good at following the rules or doing things in a certain way. If anyone tells me what to do, God forbid they ever do that, because I will do it a different way.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel. So, and clearly Whitney Houston was another musician, of course, but another inspirational leader, another inspirational woman in the music industry, that she had to stay really strong. She had an incredible talent. She had something she needed to share. And I think that's a good one to remember, that you you might not be the like a international superstar singer, but you've got something as good to share. So sometimes you just need to remember that you don't need to walk in someone else's shadow or fit in someone else's shoes to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. It's just it's really just touched me. That has, just, I mean, aside from the fact that I'm devastated when we lost Whitney Houston anyway, and I just
Mm,
absolutely adored her. But to be reminded of that, as you described yourself as being an entrepreneur, not fitting into one box and doing your own thing, it's a lovely position to be in, to be reminded of that and think to yourself, well, I've got to bang my own drum, I've got to do my own thing, and there's probably a reason why we do what we do. And when I have this conversation a lot with many people, and they very, very interestingly describe themselves in the same way, which I think is just brilliant, because if you're not that type of person, you're not going to go out there, take risks, you're not going to bang your own drum and do your own thing. And that is probably why we find ourselves where we are in this very moment. So that is a really timely reminder, and I'm definitely going to think on that one, and I will find it and probably put it on my own social media feed as well. It's yeah, it's a really thought-provoking one, that is. Thank you. And do you read? Do you have a favorite book? And this one doesn't have to be motivational. I am just nosy about what people read.
I love reading, but I find very little time to actually read. So I usually have some sort of business book and non-business book. So I will admit I am a fan of Jack Reacher. I love a bit of Jack Reacher. It's my escape and go to when I go on holiday. I actually the next book I want to read. Oh, and also the Thursday Murder Club, if you like a novel. I've just got my friend has
No,
just got me into that.
I tried. I'm
Oh,
sorry for fans, but I tried that book and I could not get into it. And I am a voracious reader. I will read everything, but I just could not get into that book. I'm sorry.
a lot of people have said that though. Actually, all my family have said the same thing, that they couldn't get into it. So it's really interesting. But one of my closest friends and I were like, I love this. Partly because I think one of the characters is my mother, but hopefully she won't listen to this. But
It's so, but you're right. So, some people are
yeah,
so evangelical about it and they adore it. And when you go on the plane, everyone's reading it. Or there's people like
yeah.
me that just don't get it. But it's amazing that the success of it. And some I do think, what am I missing? What am I missing? But yeah, carry on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And then, well, actually, some of the business books I've read, like Denise Duffield Thomas, her Get Rich Lucky Bitch. I mean, it's a classic book. I've read that a couple of times actually, and it's every time I read it, I find something new and useful in that. But the next book I'm going to read is actually one by Adam Kay. I don't know if you've heard of it. He was a doctor in the NHS, and he basically kept diaries from being a junior doctor all the way through. And it has got funny stories, it's got sad stories. It's just
Is it
really,
called
again,
This Is Going to Hurt? Is that it?
yes. They did a TV series on which I actually couldn't watch because it's a different take from the book. But the book, it was just interesting to read some of the challenges of everyday people. Like he was in gynecology, so that was where he sort of was based, and some of the things that he came across through that process, as well as dealing with various different birthing incidences and things like that. So interesting tales from behind the scenes for sure. I'm looking forward to reading the next one, but I like real life stuff. I like the behind the scenes and reality. I just find it fascinating, and the operation. How everything, not the physical operation of doing stuff. I'm not a fan of blood and gore, but um, just hearing how different departments, different areas. I think it's just my business mind, because I think about what the process is to work and how does it come to all together. So yeah, that's the next book I'm definitely going to read. It's on my Amazon list to order.
Sounds fascinating, doesn't it? And you're obviously sort of drawn in by the nuts and bolts of how things come together, and what that looks like. But it's just peeping behind the curtain of what goes on in the NHS. And I think we don't fully appreciate how difficult it is, and we don't get we don't get to see a fraction of how hard it is, and I never underestimate the work
Yeah.
and the gruel and schedules that they have. So that's how I remembered that, because that is on my list.
I'm very into audiobooks now. I like to multitask, and I can get through quite a lot of things. But it's yeah, I've got very much into multitasking while I'm listening to books. But anyway, let's move on. Thank you for that. That'll remind me to add another one to my list. So if you can give me a brief overview of what you're currently working on at the moment, and what is it that you do? And you describe yourself as a digital GP just after what we've been talking about,
Yes.
and I'm dying
Oh,
to know
it's a
more.
brilliant segue. Yeah. So I came up with the name Digital GP because I'm not just a specialist in one particular area. So I look at business from I suppose, a top level view. So I see the bigger picture. So you'd go to your GP when you have a health problem, but you don't know what it is, rather than a specialist, and they would take you from there. That's what I do. So people can come to me when they have getting stuck with their business, they don't know where to go, they've maybe been doing it for a few years, and I can help them figure out where they want to head next, because sometimes we start with a business, it's kind of starts to grow, or we don't get it to where we want it to be, and then we can kind of go, I don't know what to do with it now. And now we've got this business that you don't know whether you want to keep it, you want to change it, you're scared to change because you've started it, you put a lot on the line, and that's where I can come in. So whether that's like looking at the actual business operation, or my other speciality is marketing side. So I've done marketing for so many years, but I feel they go hand in hand with each other. For me, it's always gone hand in hand, because your strategy is supported by your marketing effort, and the way you will grow your customer base and get the results you need is by getting visible to the right clients in the right way. So they all mold together. Hence why I call myself the digital GP, because there is not one size fits all. There are frameworks you can use in any one business, as probably a lot of the listeners will know, but your business is unique because of you. And your needs and your wants and your priorities in life are different from everybody else's. And no one should have, you started a business, so you shouldn't have to choose between putting your business and your other priorities first. It's about finding that right balance and how that works for you, and putting the right operations in place. And that's sometimes really difficult to see when you're in the thick of the trenches doing that every single day. So that's kind of where I help people. I work with people sort of on a one-to-one basis, but I'm looking into getting into doing more retreats, in person days, that sort of thing, because that's what I love. And I love collaboration opportunities as well. So I love working with other people and learning about other people's businesses. As you can tell from all of my other bits and bobs, I'm just fascinated by businesses, and I just find them so interesting. And your business is created in the way that works for you, and should be created in the way that works for you. And I like hearing about how people run their businesses, because even if I don't do it that way, doesn't mean it doesn't work. And that's what I like to understand. So yeah, that's where I am, and that's what I do.
Oh, it sounds so interesting, and this is where I get really geeky as well. I love listening to what people do and how they run it. But the key point for me there, when you said one size doesn't fit all, that is so true. And it pains me sometimes when you see these big claims being made. You can buy this, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars, and you guarantee you'll get this, on that, and the other. And I just think, well, no, because you don't know anything about me, my business, my clients. What my vision is, what my what I want, and that it's that remembering that one size does not fit all, and being able to spend time with someone that isn't in your business, that can have that outside view, because I think that's the crucial part. You need an impartial view, because when you're in it, you're that so far in it, you're lost, aren't you? And you don't actually see the objective view. But working alongside someone like you gives you that helicopter view. And I know from experience that working with someone like you will spot things immediately that won't have occurred to me. And I know they'll go, oh yeah, hadn't thought of that, or oh yeah, hadn't thought of that. So we'll get to know a little bit more about your business as we move on, but it sounds so interesting. I absolutely love it already. So can you tell me a little bit more about your leadership journey and any milestones that have shaped your career?
Yeah, so I guess I was very shy. I was quite introvert when I was growing up, and I'm a trained musician, so I started in music. But actually, one of the biggest challenges I had was I was quite heavily bullied at school, and it made me quite nervous. So even though music was my safe space, I suffered massively from nerves, and it took me a long time to really come into like I'm a natural leader. That's where I'm comfortable. But for me to come into that leadership role has taken me many years to feel really comfortable with that. So as I kind of progressed through my career, I kind of started in I went into arts management. I still play the cello, I play in orchestras now, and I'm now lead my section in orchestras, because that's the only place I feel comfortable in, funnily enough now, which 10 years ago, not a chance in hell would I have done that. But now I absolutely love it. I just love being able to lead. But I think where I started was I went into arts management. So I went into behind the scenes of operational, like how music industry works, working in theatres, working on international events, working with some incredible people. And literally, it's like you just have to get your hands dirty and do whatever job's going. It's that kind of an attitude to it. And that taught me a huge amount about leadership, really, because back then, I was working doing all the jobs in the business, but I actually ended up specializing in marketing because I had a knowledge of digital. And it was then the era of social media was on its dawn into the world of businesses. So I was pushing the companies in the world of digital, like anything techie, anything website related, email. I was in charge of huge email lists and all sorts. But I was then kind of going, you need to start doing social media because it's going to change the way we do marketing. Because for the first time, really, in such a fast-paced environment as well, it's opening up a different kind of communication. So I kind of took on that role and it kind of grew from there. So then I became social media person for large scale organizations, which then became social media teams and roles. So I've got then the official social media roles started getting created, and then I created the teams. But it wasn't just necessarily people I was managing. The companies that I had then had multiple digital accounts across the organization. So in the last role before I actually left completely and started my own business, I was in charge of digital, and there was 2,000 people in the organization, and digital touched every single person in that organization in some way, shape or form. And they had huge websites. They had like, I had a team of 10 that I managed, but I also had about 6 agencies that I was responsible for as well on top of that. Plus then all of the different teams out in the country that had their own social media accounts, their own website requirements, their own digital stuff. It would come through my team. It would come through me and my team. So while I was doing that role, and my organization at the time were actually very good at training and delivering skills for people, I actually went through some leadership and management training. So I became a chartered manager through that, which was unbelievably useful because before I had always been a manager, I'd managed teams, but suddenly I'd gone from being like a manager to a leader. And even though I hadn't really realized I had probably been leading before, but it's a very different skill set managing and leading. And I learned so much through that entire process and working with my team. I had a team of very diverse characters as well. So I had to manage very different personalities and also a massive workload. It was huge, the amount of work that came through the team. I mean, in reality, they were probably a year's work already booked in at any one given time because of the sheer volume. So as a leader, I had to manage all of that. So that was such an interesting role. But actually, it wasn't the role I wanted to do longer term. And I knew I always wanted to work for myself. And in some ways, it was kind of helped me set up to go on and do what I ended up doing next, which was actually quitting my 9 to 5 office job there and opening a cafe, bar and bakery, which is something I never planned to do until about 5 months out from actually leaving the company, when I first saw the building that ended up renting, which I ended up renting in the October and opened that following December. And it's not, I'm not a professional baker by any means. I liked baking. It was a very comfortable place for me. It was just an opportunity. I found a building that needed TLC. It had an amazing history that had literally been lost under derelict old nightclubness, and it was a 1920s building with beautiful parquet flooring hidden under all of this horrible grime. And I'm like, this would make the most amazing venue in my local town, and that's how that journey started. And again, I wasn't a professional baker. I didn't necessarily have baking skills, but what I had was that confidence to know that, although may I say I wasn't I wasn't confident on a daily basis in going into this. I spent most days in the run up of leaving my job and opening the cafe going, what have I done? Because it was such a big undertaking. But I knew that I understood how to market. I understood how to do brand because I spent so many years doing it on such a large scale that I can project manage. I can get this building from A to B, hire a team. I know leadership. I've hired teams before, develop all of the operations. And honestly, it was a massive learning curve. The amount that had to be done in such a short space of time, from legal to licensing, commercial, building control, all of it. But I knew how to project manage. Like, I don't know any of the answers, but I know where I want to get to. So it's just a project management framework. Like,
Just
it's
love
simple.
honestly.
Oh gosh, I
So,
did.
so you refurb the building, the premises. So you
Mhm.
project manage all of that, and you redid the beautiful parquet flooring and all that, and you opened a cafe slash pastry bar,
Yeah.
and you did some of the baking or all of the baking, and
I
did
did do so. I had the team. I did do some of the baking, so it wasn't like I was behind the scene. I was involved in every area of
all
the
of it.
business,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we had the cafe and the bar to start with, and I learned a lot. I wasn't a bad baker before, but I was definitely a better baker by the end of it for sure. And it was my team. I'd hired like the right team as well. I had a really great team. I had people that could work in the kitchen, great people that could work front of house. I opened the bar. It was going to be a gin and wine bar, partly from my perspective of I don't actually drink alcohol at all, but I was like, I know this will be what will help bring in the income because the cafe isn't going to support how much I need to pay in the costs. And I thought no one would want cocktails. Everyone does cocktails. There's a reason why everybody does cocktails because everybody wants cocktails. So in the first 3 months, I had to then get a cocktail bar manager in because I watched people just walk
Immediately
straight
I'm
out the
going,
door.
yeah, I like cocktails.
Yeah, and we again, my ethos was always I wanted it to be homely, friendly. People can come whether they're on their own with the family, they can bring their dogs, just be relaxing, welcoming in a nice setting with a kind of like a classic vibe, but with a modern twist sort of thing. So not trendy. I wasn't a trendy kind of person. So like we literally had the bar and the cafe were like literally night and day. So my husband made a cocktail bar that slotted in where the cafe bar would normally be, and it turned into this like quite trendy cocktail bar in the evening. And it was my thankfully found a really great cocktail bar manager who knew his stuff, made them all from scratch. So, nothing brought in. And that was the ethos that my team, I wanted to give them the creativity to be able to bake themselves and input into the business because I was a rookie. I didn't know I literally did not know what I was doing here, but they had been in businesses before. So a lot of my knowledge came from them. And I was kind of like when I was building menus, I was like, these are my ideas. What do you think? And we'd work on them together and we would build it together. And they would teach me stuff, I would share with them. And it's very much a collaborative approach in my leadership rather than like being it needs to be like that. I mean, there were standard things that had to go on, but because people like what they like, you can't give them different coffees every time. It's got to be standardized. But I was like, I'm not going to be the one that necessarily trains the staff in how to make the coffee. And I do know how to do it all. But actually, I need my front of house manager to do that because then everyone else is going to be consistently in line with them. And that was where I kind of looked of how am I going to make sure the customer experience is the best? And I would cover the kitchen shift. So we'd all train up in exactly the same way. So if I was being a kitchen person for the day, I knew exactly how to do everything else that my team did. But with the creativity came when what cakes we're going to put on the counter today, we could do different things. So that was what I kind of developed. So yeah, so basically that's how I built the business. And of course, in my creation of the cafe, I had put so much effort into getting the thing open. I forgot that I actually then had to run it once I'd opened it, and it was quite an interesting. And I'd opened in December, which is possibly one of the busiest times to open in the hospitality world. It was, but from a strategic financial point of view, it was absolutely the best time because it was just such a busy month. We were absolutely run off our feet, opening and having Christmas all wrapped in one. We couldn't have done any more. We were absolutely packed out for the entire month, which was a great start. And I hadn't really in my head thought about the best case scenario. So I had to literally, I think I started with about four people in the cafe and a couple on the bar. By the end of March, I think I had 17 people working for me. So it had really just grown. And, I think one of the things of that whole entire experience, and I later went on to crowdfund a bakery as well. And that was during COVID, because we'd only opened just before COVID, about 15 months before. And then we went into this completely unpredictable time that was so difficult for so many people, but particularly hospitality got hit. But you couldn't, in some ways, you had to think of it strategically of like, well, this is an opportunity. We're closed. We can't do anything right now. How often in hospitality do you get time to actually stop and think about what's working and what isn't? And let's just focus on what works well. What do we need to change? And let's reopen when we can with a new strategy, because we know that some things are working great. I know that some things aren't working great, and I need to make them work better. And the thing that I realized when I started doing that, and I did it, my team and I, we worked together on this, because again, they were part of the business. They were the ones that were often, I was there most days, but they were the ones that actually did the jobs. And I wanted their input because they were invested as much as I was into the business. I realized that I had been doing so much of the doing. I'd forgotten my CEO mindset. I'd forgotten to think like a leader. And I was so consumed with being part of the team and part of their friend and making sure that I don't give them too much responsibility. I really had forgotten my own role. And when I did that exercise, I was like, oh, I feel like I've actually been causing more of a problem here and actually making it harder for them to do their job. So that point, I thought, right, I need to take a step back from more of the doing. And I knew, like, obviously, with the pandemic, the bar wasn't necessarily going to be the money income coming in compared to the cafe. It was going to change. Things were going to be different, which is when I started to think about, our town doesn't really have an artisan bakery. I think there's an opportunity here, because I can see how well bakeries have been doing during COVID. Some didn't, but some were really like bread literally flying out the doors with massive queues. So when I started to put the feelers out there, I thought, okay, I need to think of something else. I'm running this business. I've got people I'm responsible for. So if I'm not going to be able to open the bar properly, what else can I do? And I'm thinking, right, this is the bakery is the option. And I didn't have the cash flow. There wasn't the capital in the business. I had a room, but I didn't have necessarily the money. So I crowdfunded it, because I thought this way, and with crowdfunding, I don't know why it never occurred to me until one of my friends who was a business friend of mine, he said, why aren't you crowdfunding this instead of trying to get loans from banks that are just refusing anyone at the moment? I'm like, why aren't I crowdfunding it? That's a genius idea. Again, when someone looks at your business from outside and just tells you the obvious. So that's what I did. And I thought, well, you know what? If they want a bakery, they will invest in the bakery. Not only that, I will get ready-made customer base from day one when I open, and I can then get the bakery I want. So it's a win-win for everyone, really. So I put a whole business strategy together, whole marketing campaign, and in 30 days we'd raised £17,000, which paid for the equipment for the bakery. And yeah, it was such a just overwhelming. 300 people had invested from the local town in a really difficult time as well. It wasn't like it was easy, but we went just after we'd opened, and I didn't open until we'd mastered sourdough. So I spent so many days, I did not get on with sourdough. Sourdough is definitely not my friend. But I'm like, I can't have an artisan bakery without sourdough. It's the trend, right? Everyone had tried sourdough and failed, including myself during COVID. So that's what I did. I practiced every day. I had a head baker. Neither of us were sourdough experts. So we practiced, and it was just coming out flat all the time. It took 3 months daily work to get that right. And again, when I wasn't a professional baker by any means, and you work with 3 ingredients in sourdough, so you've got very little wiggle room to get it wrong. And it all comes down to thinking like a scientist. But eventually we got it right and we opened. And I thought at that point, I'm going to enter the team into Britain's Best Loaf Awards, partly because I want to get to know other bakeries and it's a good networking opportunity. And we can just get a ballpark of how good our bread is, because I think it's okay. But it would be good to get some feedback, and also nothing else gets me PR coverage that we're going to this event and a bit of social content. And it's a day out for the team, a big food event, because it's a massive expo, which we did 3 months after opening. And I couldn't believe we actually won. We actually won Britain's Best Loaf Awards, which honestly, my head baker just turned around and we went, "You've got to be joking." Like, no, we've apparently won. Honestly, it was just such rewarding. But sometimes in like all of these things, not everything goes to plan, and
nothing ever does, really, does it?
No. And as soon as we won those awards, we were on such a high. We've been getting loads of great PR coverage, and it was really great to be able to give that back to the community after all of that crowdfunding as well. But then the cost of living crisis just clobbered us around the head. There was just, despite my best efforts, I'd gone, there was nothing I could do. I did everything I possibly could. I was looking at all the options of how I could re-strategize, but I didn't have the cash flow still. There wasn't that leniency to be able to do anything. And the cost just kept going up. And unless I started charging ridiculous amounts of money for bread and not being able to fully open the bar properly, it just financially wasn't going to be able to work. So unfortunately, I had to make the really difficult decision to close it, which was devastating at the time. And being a leader in that, it's really hard to do, because I had a team of people that had been really invested in sort of taking that forward, and not being able to provide for them and financially support them anymore. But it was
through that whole journey from the initial idea conception, through all of that that incredible story, which by the way should have been filmed and televised, and going from the bakery, the bar, the cocktails, and then to end up with the sickening realization that the cost of living crisis was having that impact on that. And it breaks my heart, because you and how many other fantastic businesses that were built on blood, sweat and tears that just couldn't carry on anymore.
Yeah. And I think that was at the time I'd really beat myself up about it. I just felt like I'd let so many people down.
You can see now objectively, can't you, that you couldn't, you as an individual could not have prevented that or foreseen it.
No. And in some ways it was amazing that we managed to get through COVID, considering we hadn't had that length of time beforehand like some other businesses. And I think particularly in hospitality, you have to invest before you start to see a return. It's just there is no way. You need money up front, because you've got to buy equipment and all of the supplies and everything like that. And I'm paying out staff wages as well from pretty much day one. So operationally and financially, you're always going to be behind to start with until it starts to really take off. And you could see just before COVID, it was really just getting that balance right and just starting to really fly. And then of course COVID hit, and it changed just even customer behavior. And I love as you can see, I'm a creative person, but I love data. Data is my thing. And I had everything obviously in my business was digital, and some of my staff really did not like that, but I made them work to it, because I need to see the reporting, I need to see the information, I need to understand buying behaviors and patterns, what's working and what's not. And it was so interesting to look at the data pre-COVID, and then during COVID, and then after COVID, because in COVID there was no consistency whatsoever. It's like, I don't even know how to staff it on some days, because you think Saturday would be the busiest day of the week, but then some weeks it was Tuesday, and there was no rhyme or reason where we would do a Saturday's taking on a Tuesday. Like, how am I double my staff on a Saturday. How can I do that on a Tuesday when I don't know that's going to happen? And random. It's just, it was completely, nothing was consistent. It was so, you couldn't plan for the future. You had to plan for the present, and it was a very different way of thinking. But in some ways, what I can take from that is understanding how you need to be agile, and how you need to manage in those agile situations and lead people and cope with different situations. Because even in the online space now, things, even like in the last 6 months, the way social media behaves, all of these sorts of things, it's always different. You're having to think sometimes a bit more outside the box, because what worked a year ago might not work now. And it's having to really think, okay, let's be smart about this. How are we going to approach this? What's going to work for me? What's going to work for my clients? What's going to work for my business? So that is definitely something I can take away from that business of, the strategy I had when I opened in 2018 was a different strategy when I had it in 2020. I had to have a different one.
Look what you did. Look what you did. I was just when you started talking about the beginning of your career and your leadership and your management and working all the way out, and then you took the skills like package and applied them to this business, and used the same strategies, but collaborated with people around you and got involved in it. You consulted with people as well as managed them. And I just loved how you described the fact that you were working amongst the team and listening to everyone else's point of view and getting everyone to contribute. And then you created this wonderful thing. But I love the fact that you described the strategy in this as what you'd learned, and you'd applied the same principles to that business, even though, and you, by your own words, you weren't a baker, you'd not done this before, but it was the same strategy and skills that you'd picked up earlier in your career, because that's clearly all you know, isn't it? What the leadership and management that you know, and it was literally a lift and shift and applying it to that. And I just think that's incredible to have done that and created the wonderfulness that you did. But I'm curious now, did you have anybody within that? Was there anyone that inspired you along the way? Was there anyone that you looked up to that was kind of inspired that journey?
Well, actually, there's a couple of people, and just actually touching on that sort of thought on leadership. When I was doing a lot of my training around leadership and management, one of my trainers said, I'm training you to be a leader. So as a leader, it doesn't matter which department you sit in, because leadership is a role in itself. So you don't need to know how to do every single job. What you need to know is how to deliver a vision. And that's what's really important. And that was what really stuck with me, I should, as a leader, and we, in the company I was in at the time, there was lots of very hands-on people as well as office-based people. And she said, you should, as a leader, be able to go and work in any of those departments, because all you've got to do is understand how to get the best out of people and lead them in the right direction that aligns with the business strategy and goals. So that was a real key takeaway. When I opened my cafe, I actually named it after my grandmother, Elsie May.
Lovely.
So it's called Elsie May's because she was quite an incredible lady. She died about 15 years ago, so she's no longer with us, but she lived till she was 95. She very rarely complained. She looked after the elderly until she was 87, believe it or not.
Yes.
And the only reason she stopped was because she started to lose her sight, so she became blind, so she couldn't do anymore. But she loved baking, and she always wanted her own tea room. But she carried on baking regardless of the sight. She had scales that were called Jeeves that talked to her, and occasionally there were the mishaps when you picked up the wrong item in the supermarket, but she just kept on, and she never looked at the problem, she looked at the solution. It was never thinking about the problem, it's probably the wrong example, and apologies to any people in the trade, but I've had a few of these recently because I'm doing up my house. But you get people come on and go, oh yeah, that's quite a big problem. I'm not interested in the problem, I'm interested in how you can fix it. There is always a solution to it. And it was that kind of, apart from her love of baking, and she taught me a lot about how to bake and things like that, it was her ethos to thinking about the solution, not looking at the problem, that I wanted in my business. And that's one of the reasons I named it after her, was because of that, yes, you have a problem, but actually I would rather focus on the stuff I can do rather than the stuff I can't. And that's how I wanted the business to be. And that's what I took forward. And I mean, the other people that were sort of quite inspirational in my business journey was my dad. So my dad's been part of my business. He's a silent partner in this one, actually, but he's always been part of that. And he, when I first suggested this mad idea that I was going to open a cafe with no experience, was like, I'm up for that. I'll do it. So
That sounds like
suddenly,
a common thread in your family, There's
yeah.
I
And
love
it was
that.
like, I thought he would just think I would just lost the plot a bit, but no, he was like,
No.
well, he'd retired. He was at that point where he was retired, but not at a point where he wanted to stop. It's like, no, that sounds like great fun. Let's do it. I'm like, okay, great. Then my other half, he was also a business partner in it. So actually, it was the three of us that, without those two, the cafe wouldn't have been open. My husband is actually fantastic at managing trades. He's very practical. So he did a lot of the managing of the building people, because some days on site when we were doing the cafe build, there was probably about 9 different trades at one point, because we had such a tight time scale to turn it around.
I've only got a tiny glimpse of what that's like, and even in my own experience, that is not easy.
No. I mean, some of it was, and quite. I'm very lucky when I was building the cafe. I worked with some of incredible tradespeople that I've also worked on my own house, hence why I would only use them. But they would literally be there doing my electrics till 11 o'clock at night, and I'll be bringing them fish and chips. Like, I'm so sorry, but they were brilliant. I could not have done it with some of the good natures of people, really. And yeah, my dad would be up on ceilings painting. Painting. He hates painting. He painted a lot of white walls in that building. But yeah, he's always been very inspirational, and I get some of my approach from him because he's very democratic. He listens a lot. I use the example of, he taught me how to drive, but some parents, the thought of getting in the car for the first time on their 17th birthday with their daughter is absolutely purely terrifying. But he just sat there quite quietly, and if I made a mistake, he'll just tell me what it was afterwards. And there were many mistakes, so God knows how he actually managed to stay quite calm as he did. But he has that kind of, he understands, and he's been around business a lot, and he used to be in sales, that there is not one size fits all. He listens. He's not like pushy salesperson or anything like that. So he was a really good kind of person. And even now, like we talk about my business quite a lot still, because he's always really interested. And yeah, so his role effectively is to challenge my thinking. So he comes in and asks me difficult questions, which I've asked him to do deliberately, because I know it will make me better.
Yeah, you need that.
As much as sometimes I do dislike being asked those difficult questions, as we often do, I need that to challenge my own perspective on stuff, and actually, if nothing else, talk through my own reasoning as to why I'm doing something, so that I can confirm whether I feel like I'm right or wrong in certain things. So that has been like really good, of just almost being like a coach in that perspective of just really pushing. Are you sure this is the, what makes you think this is the right method to go down, or have you thought about this, or here, what you said this, what do you think? So that has always been really great, and he did that all the way through the cafe as well, so that was really helpful.
And you need someone to kind of make you stop for a second and rethink and just go over and think, is this the right thing to do? So we talked about strategy and data and all of those wonderful things. So within all of that and the work that you're doing at the moment, how important do you think communication has been for you up until this point?
It is the number one biggest, most important thing for me, without fail. My whole life has been about communications, and it's the smallest communications, I think, that make the biggest difference. And I learned a lot of that, and through my own personal experiences of making purchases, buying, it's the communications that will either make it or break it, without a doubt. And that was, for me, it was customer experience that audience first approaches, I called it. I've always approached all of my marketing, all of my everything I've done, even internally as well as externally when I've been in companies, it's been about who's the end person at the end of this. What are they gonna feel? What are they going to feel when they make a purchase? What is it going to mean to them? What experience are they going to get at the moment they find out about that product, right through to that moment they leave, and then go and tell their friends about it, because that whole journey is so vitally important. And it's communications. And you watch that, and opening a cafe and having effectively almost 3 businesses in one at one point, communication was key to that operation really successfully. And it was looking at those, and this is what people don't see, but that goes on behind the scenes. Sometimes it's absolute bedlam in the kitchen, and I will at one point write down the secret. I did a podcast for a while called Baking Boss Kitchen Secrets. It didn't really go into some of the tales from behind the counter, but I have actually kept a note of some of the stories and anecdotes that go on behind the counter, that you just a bit like the same guys of Adam Kay and This Is Gonna
You
Hurt.
should. I think that sounds like a real
Yeah,
really interesting.
but it was looking at the whole communication process, like even the moment an order was taken, of how it gets communicated to the kitchen, how the kitchen manages their orders, to the communication to the customer. You'll be amazed at what you learn from hangry people. Hangry people is the secret to getting things right. You learn your best, your most the customer that complains the most gives you your best learnings.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to have communications to manage expectations all the way through every moment, and it makes such a difference, because you can absolutely guarantee, and particularly in the world of food and hospitality, someone can come to you every day for months and months and months. They have one bad experience that goes on to TripAdvisor, and that's that. They don't write about the months and months and months of great experiences they had. And that happens so often. And often the bad experiences really weren't that bad. But it's all of that was just communications. And I always took the approach of honesty, even like of when I had moments where I had to close the business because I'd burnt myself out and I needed to take time out. And I talked about what the PR message was going to be, because I was effectively a public figure in my town by this point. Inadvertently, I managed to create a bit of a known business owner in the town, and I was quite vocal about a lot of stuff. So it often ended up on the radio and doing TV and stuff like that. And we talked about, things around messaging. I'm going to be honest. If I make a mistake in business, I'm going to say, if I'm closing down for a particular reason, I'm going to tell them exactly why, because otherwise people won't really understand the reality of what goes on. And with understanding comes empathy, and with empathy, they build trust with you, so that you can kind of, who am I to say that my customers are that stupid they can't handle the truth? So I felt that was the only way that I would approach it, was by being open, honest. And if we make mistakes, we make mistakes. We're people. It happens. We all learn from them, and we look at, and that's how we approached it. So communication was definitely the key. And it's something that should be worked on every single day in every business, how you communicate. And that will make or break what you do, I think, a lot of the time as well.
Definitely. And it pains me when I see it, and it's not, well, you can tell when it's not being considered, or when it's when it's not a major priority. But I love it when it's done well. And you're absolutely right. When you communicate with your audience, you've got to be honest, and there will be days when things aren't working as they should, and human beings are your audience, and when you're honest with them, once you get that understanding of, oh, we're closed for XYZ, people will go, okay. But they do not like being deceived or things being kept from them. And you mentioned TripAdvisor. I personally think that hospitality is one of the hardest industries in the world. And I did it when I was a student and whatever. And I honestly think it was the hardest work I've ever done in my entire life. But you're right, you can have the most glorious experience for years, but the minute the coffee's not right this one day, people will go, and it's weaponized now, I believe. People will say, well, this is going on TripAdvisor. And, I think now we've got hospitality on its knees because people are using this as a threat. But I think to communicate well, and I've seen it now where businesses are actually responding to these comments. Well, this happened and that happened, and this isn't a true reflection. And I just think, yeah, tell the truth. Tell them that you were rude. Tell them that you arrived an hour late for your table. So
then that's how you have to approach it. And TripAdvisor was a funny one. To begin with, I found this really difficult because I'm a perfectionist and I'm a people pleaser. I wanted everyone to be happy, and of course they're not going to be. We're just not everybody's literally cup of tea. And I used to really get in my head about all of these reviews. And actually, I came up with quite a strategy for managing them, whereas I turned off all the alerts. I waited till I was in a good headspace to look at them. And I know full well, I mean, I had to look at them and I responded to every single one. I called people out when they're wrong, on a regular basis, because it doesn't just affect me, my staff took it to heart as well. And it would really frustrate them when people would, particularly if there was one particular shift where someone had complained about something. And if I would read a review, I would then go and ask my staff about it as well, because there is two sides to every story. And what's written online isn't necessarily the right one. And I would want to find out. And partly one that I can then respond in the right way. And if we made a mistake, we were fine. Again, mistakes happen. We owned up to it. And we got some of our best customers by going, yeah, you know what, we're having a bad day. Come back in, we'll give you a free slice of cake and a coffee. And they'll come back in and have a lovely time, and they'll regular customers from there on in. So there was very simple, easy things you could do. Some people you never see again, and you can understand that as well. But then I didn't want my staff to feel like they were alienated by people that were writing bad things for me, then selling them out effectively, because they did a good job. So I wanted to call people out so I could then figure out the right response and the balanced response to the actual complaint. And then the third thing was we can actually learn from them. So actually, when people wrote stuff up, it was like, let's work out, okay, yeah, we did make a mistake there. Is there anything we could have done differently? Probably not. It was just a one-off. Or actually, you know what, they've got quite a good suggestion here. So, and we always ask people for feedback. When they came to the counter, we would always ask. And there'll be some people that would make you laugh, of like, oh, I ate it, but it wasn't what I ordered. Why didn't you tell us we got the order wrong? Like, don't force it down. So you'd have a bit of a joke with people because of it, but it would be,
that is funny,
quite interesting.
Probably no country on the planet that would do that except.
Oh gosh, no. And again, people are so ashamed. And if anyone ever goes out and you have a meal that isn't satisfactory, please tell people when you're there, because I can absolutely guarantee the staff would rather hear it from your mouth of what's wrong than see some review later on, or get it wrong for someone else, because you might not be the only one that's been affected by it. So as a hospitality owner, you're not by saying something's not quite right, it's not a complaint, it's just useful feedback that they can use for the future.
It's funny that people aren't comfortable, when and we've all done it. Was everything okay? Lovely, thanks. 10 minutes later, review online.
Yeah, exactly.
Where people aren't comfortable saying, well, actually, it wasn't whatever. But no, maybe that's something that we need to work on. I don't know. But it pains me that people are living in fear of these reviews when I feel that they're weaponized to some degree. But you should have your right to reply. And I also think loyal customers, for example, where we go on holiday, it is the most glorious place on the planet, and we've read reviews and people have complained, and I'm reading them going, are you serious? Do we even go to the same place? This place is faultless, and you still get people complaining. But it must just be something very strange. But it's true, you cannot please all of the people all of the time, and I actually think you'll drive yourself mad trying to. And if you're a perfectionist, as you've said, you probably spend the rest of your life trying to. But anyway, well, that it's been absolutely fascinating listening to you. It's incredible. Where can we find out more about you online?
So you can find my website, naomicrose.co, or I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at I am Naomi C. Rose on Instagram and LinkedIn, and Naomi Claire Rose on Facebook, because it won't let me change my name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you can find me there, but all the links are on my website anyway, so definitely come and find me there.
I will put all the links in the show notes, and it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's just been so fascinating listening to your story, and we didn't even get to touch on the beekeeping or the motorbikes, but you'll have to come on a podcast again. There's so much more.
Oh, definitely. I will say I've literally had bee experiences the last couple of days, because I've had honey, I've had bee swarming. I have learned a huge amount. I've had bee inspectors out as well. I've learned a huge amount about bees, so I could talk a lot about bees, and I have very little knowledge of them, really.
Oh, well, do you know what? I just think you just strike me as one of these people that just picks everything up. And again, talking about what before, the strategy that you learned, you just seem to be able to pick it up and apply it to everything. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for spending time with us today, and special thanks to my lovely guest Naomi Rose for sharing her incredible story with us. If you want to get comfortable speaking for podcasts and social media so you can turn followers into buyers, stand out and stay on trend, have the confidence of an influencer and get people hyped up about your offer, don't miss out on my free resources. You can find the links in the podcast notes, as well as the links that Naomi mentioned in the podcast. Join me on the next episode for more tips, tricks and insights. You can follow me on Instagram at Coach Amanda Jane or visit my website amandajane.co.uk. Bye for now.